No one complains about gains, but people really care about losses. One of the more critical elements of any investment strategy is agreeing with your advisor on the risk you are willing to accept in your portfolio. There are many perspectives on what that actually means, but ultimately, the question we need you to ask yourself is, how do you think you will react in market downturns? Another way to think about this is, what amount of portfolio downside you can accept before you start to feel uncomfortable about your investments. You also need to consider that different goals may require, and also allow, different levels of risks. For example, your goal to save and buy a car in 2 years' time might require a very different risk profile to your goal to save for retirement in 20 years' time. This is down to the differences in investment timeframes. In addition to the investment timeframe, the projected likelihood of achieving your goal will have an effect on the risk profile required. For example, you may consider yourself a moderately conservative investor, but based on your current investments, you may need to consider more risk if you are to achieve your goals. This is one of the trade-offs you may be faced with when considering how you'd like your money invested and where your advisor can work with you to help you make those decisions. Diversification is the practice of not sticking all your eggs in one basket. Investing across a number of asset classes is generally accepted to be a valid risk management strategy, given asset classes tend to offer different risk characteristics. The definition of diversification is reducing risk by investing in a variety of assets within a portfolio. The idea is that a portfolio of different asset classes will, on average and over time, yield higher returns and pose a lower risk than any individual investment within the portfolio. Investment asset classes tend to follow trends and tend to wane and peak at different times. So if you have all your assets in the one asset class, you run the risk of not having exposure to the right asset classes at the right time. This table demonstrates the actual amount of volatility investments have suffered during 4 major historic market downturns over the last 50 years. The conservative end of the table has less exposure to growth assets at 20%, and therefore suffered less volatility than the aggressive end, which had a 90% exposure to growth assets. The trade-off here is that although the aggressive assets had greater loss, over time, they have also delivered greater gains, with conservative producing a long-term return of 3% versus aggressive 6.5%.